Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Sterling Heights City Council to order. Please stand with me for our Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials, grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you, Ms. Barr. Can we please have the roll call tonight?
Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Sarowski. Mrs. Koski.
Present.
Mr. Radke.
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Present.
Mr. Yanez.
Here.
Mrs. Iarko.
Present.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barra. Mrs. Sarowski, our Mayor Pro Tem, did reach out to me earlier today that she is a bit under the weather, but she's likely going to be fine. She's just recuperating at home, watching the meeting, I'm sure, and following along with what's going on. So we wish her well and hope she recovers quickly. Council, we do need approval of the agenda tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Konski.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on our agenda tonight is a report from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two presentations on my report this evening. And the first one is really an interesting topic and something we've been working on for over the past year now. And it pertains to a significantly important, valuable strategic plan for our city's fire department. And as the council may know, we are always in the process of strategic planning for the organization. The city as a whole, every year goes through a strategic plan, as you know, in January. In addition, numerous departments have now updated their strategic plans. By way of example, you may recall the Public Works Department updated their strategic plan just a couple of years ago. The Police Department went through an accreditation, which in and of itself was a strategic plan. That was completed a couple of years ago. You may recall regrading recreation. That too was a significant long-range plan for the city. And in addition, the library recently completed their strategic plan. So as you know, strategic plans are critically important for a number of reasons. First, it allows us to take a look at our operations and make sure that we're always focused on best practices. And clearly we have been and will continue to be in the city. But our services are always evolving, whether it's Parks and Rec, the library, the police department, or the fire department, or our Department of Public Works. They're always evolving. And through these strategic plans, it allows us to take a good look long-term at what we need to be doing. Some of the action items you'll see are pretty straightforward and they can be implemented in short order. A short order being a few months to 6 months. In other cases, it's going to take years to accomplish some of the items in our strategic plans. But the important thing is we have a strategic plan. This will be the first one that we've had in our fire department for decades, for at least 25 years. So we're super excited about that. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to commend the fire chief who led this effort. It was a very involved effort. You're going to hear from him and our consultants shortly. And it was a very inclusive effort. The fire chief worked with our fire department leadership and the great men and women in the department, many of whom are here this evening, which is really great that they're taking part in this important presentation. But strategic plans only work if they're inclusive and have buy-in from all of our stakeholders, not only employees, but elected officials, community members, business leaders, and so on. Strategic plans are all-inclusive and reach out to many, many areas. So having said that, we'd like to start out by introducing our Fire Chief, Kevin Edmond, who's going to kick off the presentation. Then we're going to hear from our consultants, and we can go from there. Chief Edmond.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Koszybski. I'd like to introduce the Dynamex Consulting Group. Mary Ellen Harper and Stuart McCutcheon have extensive fire service backgrounds, along with many years in the consulting business. They pride themselves on developing plans that enable communities to make data-driven decisions for the best services to the residents and visitors of the community. This is the first strategic plan in the fire department. The development of this plan is a collaborative process. It included surveys to the community, surveys to the member, fire department leadership, and city administration. And it kind of ended it in a one-day workshop, which the consultants will go over. Based on my experience with this strategic planning, it works from all the places that I've worked at prior to here. This plan creates a common vision for the future that allows us to achieve that through the steps of this plan. And now I'd like to introduce Stuart to continue the presentation.
Mayor Tanner, council members, Mr. Vanderpool, thank you for having us tonight. My name is Stuart McCutcheon. I am, just a little background on myself. I went through the fire service in Central Florida with Reedy Creek Fire Rescue, covers Disney, Orlando, west side of the Orange County metro area. Mary Ellen came out of a combination system in Connecticut. And so we bring a unique perspective on fire services. Before we get started, and Chief had alluded to this, this was a very inclusive process. We had people from the community, we had city staff, we had firefighters, and really worked hard to try to get a cross-section of the community to get the best thing out there. Because, anytime you have only one group, you tend to get only one focus. But we had a really good cross-section, and I think we did a good job with it. So the presentation overview is we're going to do the service delivery, the strategic plan, and then question and answers. So I'm going to do the service delivery part just to give you an overview on where we're at now. And really the entire purpose of this presentation is to give you all information to make informed decisions. We're not here to push an agenda. We don't pay taxes. We don't run the calls. We don't live in your city. I think our job is to come in and give you the information you need. So if you have any questions, by all means, ask. Just ask that you wait till the end of the presentation. So here's an overview of your city and your department. Service demand is going up year over year. I tell you that at 5 stations and 16,000 calls, your folks are busy. They're really busy. And, there's only 2 problems in the fire service. Either you can't get there from here, which means there's no station around, or you don't have enough units to service demand. And so that's something just to keep track of, and I'm not telling you have to go one way or the other, only to say that as demand increases, you may have to start looking at additional units because your coverage is pretty good. Overall, you're about 75% EMS, which is emergency medicals. 1.3 fire is right on track with everybody in the nation. But something to point out is your service calls, your good intent, which would be like canceled en route. We thought it was an emergency call, but it really wasn't, and false alarms. You're looking at about 20% of those types of calls. And so really what that screams is fire prevention. There may be some avenues for fire prevention to come in to keep your frontline emergency units in the stations and let your fire prevention folks go out there and help out these other people. Here's our annual changes demand. You can see we're kind of, it's hopping up and down. There's not anything really surprising here, but about 6% a year is probably a good estimate as we're going along. And then the next is the number of units responding to EMS calls. And there's really, you have 2 units, you had 2 units responding to every. Since then, there's been a change in the way the management has worked. And so that number should go down. However, it's good to know what we did in the past and kind of what the conditions were that our firefighters were out there dealing with. Temporal variation is just variation by different times of day or months or years. By month, you're pretty well flat. By day, you're pretty normal. Business hours, you're busy. Weekends, you slow down. And about 6 a.m. you crank up, and by about 8, 9 p.m. you slow down. This is population density, so we have a big commercial core running down the center of the city, and then off to the southeast. And just because we have commercial core, I mean, typically you'd look, you need people to have emergencies. But because we have that central core, I think we're going to see that a lot of activity happens there. This is an incident count, and so the reason this is important is because when we look at the response and we start seeing red dots, like we're taking a long time to get there, what's important is to look back at this and say, okay, well, how often are we out there? If we're only out there one time in the last 3 years, probably not the end of the world, because we can't supply everything to everybody all the time. It'd be cost prohibitive. So here is our incident count. Later when we get to the demand, we'll see it, but really you all have very outstanding coverage. Here's our hotspot map, and so this is how many calls are happening relative to each other. Law enforcement uses this a lot with figuring out where crime's happening. If we have a break-in at 121, 123, 125 Main Street all within a week, we're going to throw a hotspot because all those calls are right on top of each other. This is pretty much telling the same thing, but we can see that big hotspot up there in the northeast outside of Station 2, and it's a busy area. The problem with that is when 2 goes out and takes a call, probably 1, 5, and maybe 4 are going up next. When they're out of pocket, it's longer response times to get back to them. And so we just want to kind of keep that in mind and monitor that as time goes on. 4 and 8 minute travel times, theoretically, we have pretty good coverage. But again, if we don't have enough units to cover the demand, once that one unit goes out of service, somebody's coming from a distance away to get back to it. Here's our average travel time. And so if you look up in your top right, you can see we're starting to get light greens and yellows. That was also where our hotspot occurred. What this is probably indicating to us is we don't have enough units to service the demand. Because when we get in the yellow, it's 6 to 10 minutes to get out there. What that means is it's one of these outlying stations coming into that area. It's not Station 2. They're already committed to a call. And so, at the end of the day, it just really depends on the commission's feeling on how quickly we want units to get on scene. This is just some ISO stuff. ISO comes around about every 3 to 5 years, and they rate you. They only rate on fire. They have nothing to do with EMS. You all are 75% EMS. If my bread and butter is in one bucket, I'm not going to necessarily worry about another bucket. We're just showing you this for information. ISO is important, but I don't think it's as important as providing the core services the city needs. And so overall, 41% coverage, a mile and a half. That's an estimated 4-minute travel time. About 27% for ladder coverage, but they're centrally located. They're a secondary unit. And everybody within town's within 5 miles of a fire station. So, overall, you're pretty good. Effective response force. Now, this one, if you take time to kind of look at it, you see around Station 1 at the core of the city, there's some green, but there's also some red. And it's just your road network does not allow some of these firefighters to move back and forth as quickly as they'd like to. Additionally, up in that top right corner again, where we had all of our concentration density, we only have 5 firefighters there when we're at minimum staffing. So the upshot is we could do interior firefighting operations. The downside is there's not enough people there to really get the job done. So, firefighting is usually 3 people on a hose line kicking in the door. You got one guy on the nozzle, you got another guy behind him looking at everything. You have another guy at the door dragging that hose in, right? Because it's 150, 200 feet long, and they're pushing hose in the door and trying to stick with these folks. Then you have the guy manning the pump panel and a guy in command. If there's anything else going on, there's not enough people there to do it. So it's just something to keep in mind in the future. Resource reliability, call concurrency. So when you're having a call, not all the time, but when a call is going on, about 29% of the time, it's only one call. But that means about 70% of the time, there's multiple calls going on. And what that does is affect your response force. So if we had a structure fire and we need 15 people there, we will know that, even when we get 2 calls, up to 2/3 of the time, there's people missing. There's at least 2 crews missing out of stations. And so we won't have that effective response force. We're probably going to have to go to mutual aid or something else to get that met. And then the one to the right is unit hour utilization. You can see the squads are, as expected, are all pretty high up there. So when we look at our performance here in just a minute, I'm going to tell you about the 90th percentile. When crews are committed more than 10%, it affects that 90th percentile performance, right? Because they're only there 80% of the time. So we have 10% units are coming in from other places. It drives that call time up. And so what I would tell you is that there's no national standard or anything else, but just generally speaking, at about 20%, they're nearing saturation. At 25, you're going to probably start seeing some other issues. If you ever let it get up to 30, you're going to have massive issues. There are communities across the country that have let it get that high, and it didn't bode well for them. So just, I would keep an eye on these statistics and just make sure we're cognizant of them, because, once you're, it isn't like a job where you go and you work 4 hours here and then you're sitting over here the rest of the time. They're in and out constantly. So they're gone an hour and a half, they're back for 20 minutes. They're gone for an hour and a half, they're back for 45 minutes. They're gone for an hour and a half. They can't do training, they can't do additional duties, they can't do all these other things, because when they come back, they're so smoked that they just are trying to recover before the next call happens. And so you're not in a critical phase yet, but you're right on the precipice. So the response continuum, and this is where we're going to get in the 90th percentile, and for this, we ruled out basically non-emergency calls. So calls for assist, say from law enforcement, calls that, somebody called and they were false alarms, they thought there was something, there wasn't, severe weather, because, if you have a hurricane or something come in, that's not really an emergency response, and special assignments. So we filtered all those out, and 3 main parts are call processing, turnout, and travel. Call processing is from the time the dispatch center gets the call until the first unit's dispatched. Turnout is from when they're dispatched until they go en route, they're in the truck and they're moving. And then travel time is the time that they get there. Response time, you'll see that a lot in fire services because we still have a lot of volunteers, and that's from the time they're dispatched till on scene. And the overall is total response time. And the reason this is important is because there's a thing called EMD and EFD, which is emergency medical dispatch and emergency fire dispatch. The problem with it is when you have sheriff office-driven dispatch centers, it's all about process and not about outcomes. My own experience was when we finally started paying attention to this, the more complicated the call, the longer the time frame went. So if it was a slip and fall at Publix or at the grocery store, 30 seconds. Cardiac arrest with a structure fire and a plane crash into the house, we were roughly at 8.5 to 10 minutes for any critical call, just in call processing. And the way we finally started learning about it was we'd show up on scene and people would say, "Where have you been?" So that's an important part to keep track of. It's not always within your control, but it's something we want to pay attention to. So we have ComTech call processing, and 1.5 minutes is pretty fast. They're doing a good job. When we hop over to the next, at fires, we're at 3 minutes. EMS, we're at 5. There's a lot of time going by between the time you call 911 and these folks back here, even though the call happened. So it's not necessarily something within your control, but it is something we can start talking about. Performance-driven contracts, regular updates, quarterly updates, things of that nature. That's what I would encourage you to do. I'm not saying these folks can't do a good job. What I'm saying is they're doing the best they can, and it really takes some motivation from stakeholders to make this better, because without that, they won't have the funding or the impetus to do it. Turnout time. So for fires, it's 80 seconds, which is a minute 20. So, I mean, we're really close to hitting national standards. EMS at 60 seconds, but a lot of these are happening during the night, and they're probably hopping, you know, they'll dispatch this station, that station's not available, they go to the next one. So there's some time lag happening. So the EMS, I feel like the guys are probably turning out pretty quick, but, you know, when we look at our data, it's dragging out. And that probably, again, goes back to the idea that, you know, it's not that we don't have a station near us, that we may not have enough units in service to service the demand. Overall, we're in a minute 45. When we're talking nationally, though, that's still pretty good turnout time. Travel time, we had the estimate where we saw that yellow going everywhere. We should be pretty good, and we are pretty good overall. It's at just over 6.5 minutes with the turnout time, a little over a minute. I mean, you go to metros, most metros have a standard of about 7.5 minutes for response time. So time from dispatch to the time on scene. If they go over 7.5 minutes, they have to fill out paperwork explaining why they took longer. Y'all are pretty close. So in no way am I telling you these folks are not doing a good job or that they're not getting there quick enough. But what I am saying is all the trends with this call volume going up and everything else are leading me to believe we probably ought to start talking about additional units at some point in the near future. And then here's our response time. So I just told you overall 7.5 minutes. We're at 7:57. We're a little over, but you're still within bounds. And so the longer we let this go, I don't see anybody around here really getting any slower. They're only going to get busier as people age out. And so it may be time to look at an additional unit, peak demand unit. There's a lot of different options to take care of a problem. We saw in that temporal variation, Monday through Friday, during the daytime, not during the weekends. There may be some opportunities there to do something different. Right now, overtime's a major issue for y'all. These folks are getting burned down on overtime, and so probably overtime is not the answer. But we may be able to look at different options. And it's all going to be subject to bargaining. And then here's total response. So what this is if you're in a car accident, whatever happens, call 911. Overall, we're about 9.5 minutes. From the time you hit send until that first unit arrives at the 90th percentile. So what this is saying is that 90% of your population is going to experience this time or better. A lot of folks are going to experience it better. 10% are going to experience it worse. And the reason we're using percentile and not average is because averages are really subject to outliers. So, for example, if I had 10 turnout times, 9 of them are 60 seconds, and the last one we had the ladder up or the tower up, we were in the bucket flowing water doing training, and we were 11 minutes, our average is going to come out to 2 minutes, where our 90th percentile would be 1 minute, our median would be 1 minute, everything else is telling us 1 minute. Averages are meant for data sets with a normal distribution, so that normal bell curve. Response data for fire and police is shifted all to one side. It does a big spike, and it drops like a rock and tails off forever. And so that's why we're using fractile performance, not averages, because we take the average, it's going to look probably better than what it is. And the way you tell is if you take your median and you take your average, and they're about the same answer, average is a good metric. For fire response data, your average is probably about 40% less than what your median is. And then here's some of our mutual aid folks, just they're scattered around. We have the capability to do it internally. I think these folks can probably get the job done, but on occasion, they're going to need to call them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ellen, and she's going to talk about the strategic plan.
So I really want to give credit to your chief and his command staff for the approach they took to this strategic plan. There's 2 ways to do it. Sometimes we just come in and we do the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we just work through what everybody's preferences and priorities are. But your team, the city, the fire department took a step back and said, let's do the evaluation. And the benefit of that is to have that third party, to have that data, and to have those conversations about the data. And I find that that's a much more inclusive process, because if you don't take the step back to look at the data, all you're doing is shuffling internal biases that may have existed. And to the credit of your team on the city, the fire department side, they were very open to new ideas. They were very open to looking at the data. They were willing to discuss it. And everybody came to the table with the goal of what can we do to improve the services in the community. So it really was a very positive process for everybody. So what we did is we did do a series of stakeholder surveys because we wanted, again, to get input from people other than just the fire department. We could put the firefighters in a room and come up with a great strategic plan of what they want, but if we're not involving the stakeholders in the community to see what do they want, what are they willing to pay for, then we're really not getting a full picture of what needs to happen within your community. And again, to credit your process, we had just some really engaged people from all different walks of life within that room, and they were engaged from the beginning to the end of the day and excited about the process. It was a very positive experience. So we did 3 surveys. We talked to the fire department members of the community, and what we did is we also talked to city staff person to get information on that. And what I tried to do is we identified the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges by each of them and looked at what the top 3 things were that each group said were their issues. And then we looked for overlap, because if we can find something that's important to your community and it's also important to the members of your fire department, that's a really good place to start. And that's how we identified the 4 initiatives. We picked the number 4 because of the size of your department. If I give you too many goals, you're just going to get overwhelmed and not get them done. We wanted something that was manageable for the members, for the chief, to bring to you in a way that you can implement it in a systematic fashion that makes sense. So we picked 4, and looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, the cumulative results of that said that the strengths, both groups felt that personnel was a strength of the fire department. Weaknesses, they felt that staffing, the number of people that were staffing was a concern. And they also felt that a weakness was city or community support. They felt that there could be more involvement and support from the community for the fire department. When we looked at opportunities, the cumulative group, again, was the city community support. And then challenges, how to increase staffing, getting that support, and then increase the call volume and how to manage that. So those were the big priority issues that were out there on the table for discussion. And that's why we wanted that really transparent, inclusive process, is to get all different types of people talking about these challenges to see where do you want to go with it and what's going to work for your community. So when we came up with the 4 strategic initiatives, the 4 main focuses were communications, staffing, resource deployment, and apparatus and equipment. And what we did is we gave them some sample goal topics based on the evaluation that we had done with our recommendations and said, look, these are our ideas. You guys now need to look at them and decide out of all these things what's important to you, and have the stakeholders that live here, pay taxes, work in this fire department, come together and say, okay, these are the things that matter to us. And that's exactly what they did. So we started out with the mission. Mission is, why are we here? And it's really important, I think, for a group to systematically look at the mission and say, does it still apply to the job we're doing? Fire departments in particular have evolved a lot over the years, and the job they're doing today may not be exactly what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we put the old mission up on the board, and we got the whole group to come to the table and talk about, why are we here? Does this reflect what you do? And can you stand behind this? And we had some fabulous feedback. They beat that up for like an hour. And they came back with a new and improved proposed mission statement. And the consensus was that the mission of the City of Sterling Heights Fire Department is to respond in times of crisis to provide fire, rescue, and emergency medical services for those who live, work, and visit our growing community. We accomplish this through preparation, prevention, and community outreach. So, going back to that, should this be adopted, that should be the reason that everybody comes to the table. And every decision we make should go to forward and support whatever mission is adopted for the department. But you've got a really great draft mission statement here that has stakeholder involvement from members of, the city staff, the members of the community, and the fire department. And then we did the vision, which is, where do we want to look like in 5 to 10 years? What is our goal for the future? And you didn't have a vision statement, but the group came up with one. And the consensus of the group was that the City of Sterling Heights Fire Department will be the premier provider of emergency services in the country. We will adapt to the evolving needs of our diverse community, exceed their expectations through high-quality, progressive service, professionalism, and continuous improvement. And what I would tell you is when we did the station visits and met with the members, you have people that care about this community. They are providing really good community service. They're out there helping the people. And having this vision really shows the pride that goes into the job and how proud they are of the services that they're providing to the community. So again, that's important because as you're bringing new people in, you want them to buy into that vision and realize that there's an expectation in this community of excellent service. And if that's not something somebody wants to do, then this is probably not the department for them to work in. Then we talked about organizational values. Again, we want to communicate, especially to people coming in, what is important to our organization and what do you need to be, falling into line with. And the group came up with excellence. They felt that was all about professional conduct, loyalty. They want people that are going to be committed to the community and to each other. They felt integrity was important, upstanding ethics, morals, principles, and values. tradition, to respect the past and inspire future generations, and equity. They wanted everybody to be fair and impartial. So going back to that, as we're making decisions and policies and looking at things, these are the organizational values that they want to use as the foundation for a lot of those decisions going forward. So then we had the initiatives and communications. What we did is each group was allowed to make up to 3 goals, and some of them got a little excited and made a few more. But we had them look at things such as identifying possible sources for public information officer. They decided they wanted to propose a job description for the public administration officer. And each goal was broken into steps. And what we did is we put a timeline with every single one of them so that you can see when things are going to happen. Some of these things can get done in a week or 2 or 3. Some of them maybe 4, 5, 6 years out. So the communications group's first goal was, again, that proposal to establish the fire department public information officer. And then their second goal was they wanted a hot sheet for internal communications. We identified communications as a challenge. And the reason for that is sometimes we don't manage expectations. People are sitting in the firehouse waiting for certain information to come a certain way. Fire chief sending other information a different way. And just getting everybody at the table and say, what do you want to know? How often do you want to know it? What can you know? What can you not know? There's certain things that we can't communicate. We need to manage that expectation as well. So that was that hot sheet of what do they want to know and how often do they want to know it. And then the third goal that group came up with was that they wanted to strengthen the relationship between the members and City Hall. And this is a positive thing. This is the fire department saying, we want to get involved. We want to know more about our community. We want to know what else is going on in the city, which I'll be honest, we don't often see that. So often we see people that live in a silo and all they care about is the fire department. So to have a fire department saying, we want to know more about city operations and get involved, embrace that. That is a very positive thing for your community. So then we had Initiative 2, which is staffing, and they came up with their goals. And the first one they wanted to do was eliminate cross-staffing of fire department apparatus. So Stuart alluded to that when we looked at the turnout time. You know, if you're staffing an engine and a medical truck and you have to run back and forth and move equipment and do all these things, that's legging out your turnout time. So that's one of the reasons that we want to look at, you know, can we dedicate staff and have the right number of resources to get the people on the road when they need to, rather than having them shuffle back and forth and move things. Their second goal was that's all 2.1. So that's all 2.1, eliminate the cross-staffing. And they made all the different goals of what they want to do and how long it would take. And they really were focused on trying to collect some data, trying some things, collecting some data, reporting on it. And we really encouraged the group, you know, you've done a lot of studies, and sometimes people talk, but things don't happen. We said, look, try something. Try it for a short period of time, collect the data. If it's working really well, keep doing it. If it doesn't, now you know it didn't work, but you've got the data. So we really did encourage them to kind of think out of the box and take some chances. And to their credit, they were open to that. Goal 2 within that was to reduce the stress on the emergency response system. So again, you know, we've got those peak demand hours. We know when you're busy. We know the times you're busy. So they came up with a number of different ways that maybe they could, you know, put better resources into the system when they're needed, rather than just arbitrarily staffing 24/7. The third goal they wanted to do was update the fire department recruitment program. Again, you've got some people that are very proud of the work they do, and they really want to work hard to bring in more high caliber people to make sure that they have the robust staff that they need to provide the services to the community. And then performance objectives. Stuart went through all of your different performances, your turnout time, your call processing. We showed you the national standard. We showed you where you are. The recommendation of this group was to come up with some objectives. You know, where are we now? Where do we want to be? Can we get a little faster with our turnout times? Can we get our travel times a little faster? Let's establish some goals, monitor them, track them, and then you'll know when you need to add resources into the system to meet those goals and objectives. And then their next goal was they wanted a committee to establish emergency medical dispatch. And again, that's asking the questions to make sure we're getting the right resources, the right type of resources to the right calls, and using them most efficiently and effectively. And then they wanted to develop a community risk assessment, standards of cover, and that's looking at all the risks within your community and matching the response to it. We shouldn't necessarily be sending 5 trucks to everything, no matter what it is. If it's a big call with a lot of, you know, technical things going on, they're going to need more resources than perhaps a less serious call in a single-family dwelling. So the community risk assessment would help you, again, to realign the risk with the benefit and get the right resources there. Goal 4 was apparatus and equipment, and the first thing they came up with was that they wanted to maintain safe and functional apparatus. I know the city's working toward, you know, putting new apparatus into place and getting their, but what they wanted to talk about was maintenance and coordinating and training people and really taking some pride and ownership in their apparatus to make sure that they could keep them running and consistent and viable. So that was their first goal. Their second goal was to maintain livable, functional fire stations. You know, these people are here, they sleep, eat, work. It needs to be functional and livable, and who better to ask than the people that are in there. So they came up with some goals of how they were going to come up with some recommendations and put information through the chain of command so that the right people are getting the right information to make decisions about how they can improve the fire stations. And then there was a discussion on goal 3 was to provide up-to-date equipment and technology. The fire service is changing. We have a lot more than just ladders and hoses now. There's computers and equipment, and again, the people on the front lines have ideas. The idea of the strategic plan is to take the people on the front line and funnel that information up through the chain of command so that the command staff can make those decisions rather than just guessing what they need. We want to take their input and act upon it. So then what we did is we helped everybody by giving what we call a progress report. We took every single one of those little objectives. So every goal had 3, 4, 5 steps. We put them all on a master list and we put dates on them and they're in order so that they can report in and the chief can look at everything and say, okay, this is on track, this is not on track, and then make those decisions that he needs to make. Do we need to change a timeline? Do we need to modify a goal? Do we need to add resources? But he can manage that. And what I would tell you is that this is a time management tool. You have a lot of goals and objectives here. We really need to follow that plan. And if you decide there's something else, like a pandemic that pops back up that's really important, the first question should be, okay, if we're adding something in, what are we taking out? Because we can't keep adding and expecting people to get everything done. So, again, this is a time budget. If we're going to change goals and objectives, we need to take things out. But the key here is the transparency. We've done an organizational pause. Everybody's come to the table and said, these are the things that are important to us. And we've managed expectations by saying, this are the things we're going to do, and here's the timeline for them. If things change, the key is to be transparent and communicate that. Goals shouldn't just disappear. They absolutely might need to change, but we should communicate that. We had to change the goal because of this or whatever's going on, but everybody should know where we are, where we're going, and how we got there. And with that, what we recommend is that strategic plans get adopted. The last thing we want to do is send all these guys out there working on all these goals and objectives and have them come back to you with all these reports and say, here you go, and you say, well, we didn't want that. So, ideally for you to give them direction and say, yes, we agree, we like some of these, all of these, whatever part you like, but we kind of need to all come to the table. You can say, yes, this is the direction, and then they can go in it, and that way we're all kind of moving in the same direction. With that, I'd open for questions, or do you want to close?
Yeah, I can do a little close on just kind of what we've accomplished to date. So one of the things that was brought up is communication. So what we have done since we closed the strategic plan to now is we've developed a weekly bulletin that goes out to the members of the organization. That was started around the end of August, sometime in August, and it goes August, September. So it's been going on. It goes out once a week to try to improve that communication that we have. Some of the other things, that medical priority dispatch, I've been in communication with Comtech to move those along. We met with the Medical Control Authority. We have a meeting later this week again with Comtech and kind of moving towards a medical priority dispatch, which will give us the ability to make sure that we're responding appropriately with the call that's there and how we do that. That's going to be a big thing. Apparatus, we do have, you guys approved a fire engine. Last year, we do have a demo that we purchased that was approved by council, and that should be coming in November at some point in time. So that's going to replace engine 3 that's out of station 1, and that's going to go into reserve. And then the oldest reserve will go out of service. So we're moving in that direction with the apparatus. One of the other things that we did on some trial of stuff, we moved some of this stuff off the rescue truck onto some fire engines to get them out the door and staff the ladder with 3 people. And then when we do have staffing available, we have put a 6 ambulance in service. I do have some limited stats on that we've been doing that for about a month, and it's been about 120 hours that we've been able to squeak out of that with the staffing. And it's went on about 48 calls in that 120 hours. And it all depends on what hours and days of the week that we can get that stood up as to, is it during that high peak time or not? And I think that's provided some relief for the members with that. And we've done that without medical priority dispatch. So it's ran out of station 1, and that 6 and 1 just kind of flip back and forth when we have that in service. So those are some of the progresses that we've made. We've got a lot more on the plate. We're working with our apparatus group on a system to measure our fire apparatus and report back to the city administration on the status of those on a yearly basis. It's kind of like a scoring sheet for each apparatus as we go forward. And then we have plans for an ambulance in this budget year to replace one of the older ones. So with that, any further questions? Oh, actually, what I would like to do right now, if he's willing, Ryan's here, if he wants to come up and say a few words.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Vanderpool, Mr. Koszewski. I'd actually take a little personal privilege first and thank Mary Ellen and Stuart, I can't thank them enough for all the work and dedication they put into this study. It's been countless hours, and we can tell, I've seen numerous studies in my 16 years of working here, and this one is very in-depth, as we just saw tonight. I've never seen anything like it, so I'm sure I personally, and everybody sitting behind you and watching in the stations, thank you. I'd also thank Councilman Yanez for bringing this presentation to you tonight, and for rest of council for getting behind him and making this happen, because it was very important. As you can see, a lot of data went into this, and it just shows it's really thought-out process, so thank you. But then the last thing I would say is, I would personally promise all of you to, really, that the Sterling Heights firefighters, Local 1557, are determined to make moves with this. We're gonna use this as a foundation to better this city in the way we respond, and we are fully behind it, as you can see behind me. We do not want this department to be left in the shadows as it grows. We know it's growing out, and more importantly, it's even growing up, and that's dangerous for us, so we want to be behind it and make sure we are keeping up on all that. Yeah, so I just want to do that. I'm going to make sure that I'm available, along with the chief saying that we're going to do weekly communications. I'm going to promise to communicate with all of you more too, as well. Keep you on the loop on our side on how things are happening. So I'll stand behind that, but I do thank you. Thanks, Chief.
And, I'm sorry.
All right, just to close, thank you all so much for your time and attention tonight. Truly appreciate it. This is a wonderful process for us to do as well, because we have the community involvement. And I just want to throw one more mention out that your fire chief is a data whiz. And, we are all over the country, north, south, east, and west, and some international. He knows what he's talking about when he throws numbers out there at you. So please, listen to what he's saying. He is good. He might have even taught me a couple things. So thank you all so much tonight, and I appreciate it.
And Mayor, one last closing, and you and council, I'm sure, may have some comments, but I was struck by the statement in the vision statement, the new vision statement, that says the department will be a premier provider of emergency services in the country. And I think country is a really important word. We have been leading the way. The fire department has an ISO 2 rating, which departments are rated on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the best, 10 the worst. To my knowledge, there's no departments in Michigan that have a 1 rating, unless it happened just very recently. And there's only a handful that have a 2 rating out of hundreds of departments statewide. So the fact that we have a 2 rating really illustrates that we have achieved a level of excellence, and the challenge for us moving forward and the importance of the strategic plan is to ensure that we continue that level of excellence, and to the extent possible, even raise the bar, as the vision statement states. And there are a couple other actionable items that we're hard at work on coming out of the strategic plan, beyond what the chief just mentioned. We're looking at a Station 5 upgrade. In fact, the mayor and city council have approved in the budget this year an assessment, which is a first step. We take a good holistic look at the entire station, and that allows us to budget for the funding. Suffice it to say, it's going to be probably a couple $1 million to get that station upgraded. But then we will have 5 stations that are in really good shape. The community needs assessment has been budgeted. It is in the current budget, so we're looking forward to getting that accomplished. Additional apparatus was mentioned. That is in the budget as well. And I want to comment on a global objective of the mayor, the city council, and administration. And there's still a strong commitment to ensure that all of our employees, especially police and fire, continue to be in the top tier when it comes to wages and benefits. That's been a long-standing commitment that will continue in this strategic plan. So, Mayor, thank you very much. Thank you for you and the city council for approving the strategic plan and allowing us to get it done and we look forward to strong collaboration with the fire department to make it happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. I know you do have another presentation tonight, but I'm certain members of council will want to weigh in on this and ask questions while we have Stuart and Mary Ellen here, and the chief as well, and the fire union. So, council, is there anyone who'd like to make any comments or has any questions for any of the presenters tonight?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yanez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You might as well stand up, both of you, at the podium. Chief, get ready. Sit on the edge of your seat. First of all, I want to thank you for this document and the work that you did. I absolutely agree that you got broad community support, community input. I was there back in May when we did this program, and everybody was engaged. Everybody. These guys really care about their department and the people they serve. And I come from that lineage. I learned from the people who came before me, and I hope I didn't teach anybody any bad habits before I left. But I hope you appreciate Florida after coming to this weather today.
Oh, I'm in my glory.
And I will say, sir, if we do have a hurricane here, it's all hands on deck.
Call me, I've done a bunch of them.
Yeah. So just real quick, I don't have a lot. You were very thorough, and and again, I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned how much engaged the men and women of the fire department are, and how much they care about their job. So let me just touch on a couple of things. One is the alternative response vehicles, and in the document, it gave us some examples of some communities that are using those. But one of the things I noticed is that none of the communities are really comparable. I mean, Memphis, Tennessee has 1,600 firefighters. Portland has 699. Tucson has 633. We have, I think, what do we have in 106 total, right? Well, how much in suppression? Yeah. So, the question is, with our staffing and our increased run load, are we able to handle alternative response vehicles as we sit right now, or are we going to have to look at
Well,
alternative manpower?
when we look at case studies, most of the case studies are going to be in major cities because small towns typically are not going to do it.
We are the fourth largest city in the state of Michigan. I just want to point that out.
But, we're talking about 100 people in the fire department, more or less.
Yeah.
But I said that to say this, you can never accomplish anything if you don't try something. And so, the last place I was chief at, we had, I don't know, 50, 60,000 people, maybe 60, 70 firefighters. We took, and I'm not saying that y'all can do this right now because overtime is killing these guys and they're being mandatory all the time. So that is probably something to look at with a relief factor so we can get some folks to give these guys some relief. But with that said, if we weren't in that situation, you look and you say, when are we the busiest? What's the 8-hour period when we are absolutely the busiest? Let's put 2 folks on a BLS unit, which is basic life support, because probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 90% of your calls are basic life support. There's no timeline with a BLS call. It could take 5 minutes, it could take 30 minutes. If I had a bad dream about a spider in my closet, I don't need a unit immediately. And so that unit could take care of those things. Some success stories, Sarasota County, Florida, started just that program. They started connecting homeless with different groups to help those folks out. In the process, they got hooked up with USF Medical School, and they put a medical doctor on those trucks. Well, once the MD got on the trucks, they could increase the level of training they had and the equipment they had. And so now, not only did they take care of the BLS calls, but we had a major incident. They knew within 15 minutes, a unit would be arriving with just the top-notch staff, the best medics we have, and a medical doctor. And so I'm not necessarily saying that that's where you all would end up. What I am saying is, if we don't try anything, we can't accomplish anything. So whether it's 30-day, 60-day trial, let's try some ideas. We try it, we'll look at the data, it works or it doesn't. And we just go from there.
Okay, fair enough. One of the other things you pointed out was increased staffing in fire prevention. We don't do, obviously, we don't do annual inspections, not even in our most dangerous buildings in the city, we don't do annual inspections. Where do you think we need to be in regards to fire prevention? Because I think you said in your presentation that if fire prevention is doing its job, some of our run load is going to come down, right? And so that's actually going to help.
Yeah, so to give you an example, the first department I worked for, I want to say I did a structure fire my first 7 shifts. Their fire prevention was pretty weak. But we came into a gas station, they were storing 5-gallon gas cans inside the station next to the boiler. And what do you know, one day one of them touched off. And it's just, I would love that if I have an injury or my child has an injury, that the fire department get there in less than 4 minutes and they provide top-notch service and everything else. What I'd like even more is if somebody would come by and maybe point out, hey, you can't do this or something bad's gonna happen, and it never happens to begin with. And that's what fire prevention is. And the reason we're seeing call volumes go, critical call volumes go down, like structure fires and some of those things, especially in the Sun Belt, like Florida, Texas, some of these states, is because we're using fire prevention to drive that message home. And so, again, the best response reactively is great, but wouldn't it be even better if we could prevent it from ever happening to begin with? And that's fire prevention all day long.
Thank you. So you also mentioned that overtime is probably not the answer. And we don't have our finance director here, so I don't know how much we spent in overtime last year. Chief, do you happen to know? We don't, it's probably a lot, right? Probably enough to hire a couple firefighters. And you think, go ahead.
So there's a thing called a relief factor. And so this is the way that the thinking goes. Let's say, just for an example, we're spending $1 million a year in overtime. Well, $1 million a year is basically a 3-person engine company all year long. So what we do is we look at that and we do the math and say, how many people could we hire to eliminate this overtime and what that cost is, and see where that balancing point is. And so we hire people, typically 25%, give or take 8 about either direction, just depending on the size, the complexity. But 25%, probably for a 100-person department, about 20 is a better number. But you hire the people that you're spending in overtime, and you have extra folks on there now. And so now if I have a 4-person minimum staffing on an engine, and I have 5 people, most of the time, when that one person takes the day off, we're still meeting our minimum staffing. And it's really just comes down to the math. It's, no more, no less. We look at our average vacations and everything else and look at that time, and we just do the math and figure out how many people we could hire. Now, we have to take into account benefits and all the fringe and everything else, because it's a big expense as well. But if we can reduce that overtime by hiring a couple more, we'll, generally speaking, have more folks on duty all the time, and we're really not spending any more money. And so that's a model a lot of county and large municipal departments have taken, is to figure out what that relief factor is, and they tweak it year to year. It's not a one-time shot. You look at it every year and look at the math, look at the numbers.
And then I'll just wrap this up because I don't want to take up any more time. Maybe somebody else has some questions here. But, we kept talking about the dedication of the firefighters. And I noticed in the document under staffing, I'll read this. I'm sorry. You're not supposed to do that, but I'm going to do it. It says, when leaders empower their people, the members can quickly identify issues and solutions needed to fix them. They take pride in keeping their community happy and being part of the organization. An empowered environments and an environment where all employees share the power and work toward the same goal, or work toward the same goals. Dynamics Consulting Group suggests that this would behoove the city of Sterling Heights. So having written that, knowing what you know about these guys here, and then I think the city manager said that this is always in the process, this program here, always in the process. So we're constantly, like you say, we're looking at data, maybe we're making changes, maybe we're not. How important is it to have the input of the people who are out on the streets every day?
Absolutely important, and that's exactly what we said. We need to empower them. They know what's going on. They know better than any of us what these calls are, what they're facing every day. Get that information from them. We need to change the communication from top down to bottom up. They need to be sharing that information. It needs to come up through the chain of command to be acted on by the chief and the council. That empowering, we want them to start making decisions at the lowest possible level. Every decision in the fire department shouldn't come to the fire chief's office. There's a lot of things that really can and should be handled on the front lines, and we really want to do that professional development and empower these people and give them areas that they can operate with authority without having to go to the next level because they know what their lane is and what they can do within their authority.
So positive change doesn't come from one direction, right?
Absolutely not.
You need input. Okay. That's all I got. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Mac.
no, it's both directions, and just kind of on that token, the National Fire Academy offers training to every firefighter in the country for one class a year. All you have to pay for is a meal plan. They pay for travel, they pay for lodging, they pay for all the expenses. It's just the meal plan. It's like $50 a week, something like that. What that does is when they get there, they're meeting firefighters from all over the country. And so, for example, I was probably 40 before it first occurred to me that a hose line could freeze on the street. However, I don't know many people that have to deploy two people, one with a pike pole and one with a suction line to a canal, watching out for alligators. So everybody kind of has different experiences. But in saying that, it's all about networking. When you get up in your professional career, it's networking with people you know. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I call my buddy who's already done it. Or I call and ask folks, and that networking and that expansion of education and information will really enrich the department. And we're really talking about $50 to $100 per firefighter per year to put them with the best of the best at the National Fire Academy in Maryland.
Real quick, one last thing. In all the years that you've been doing this, have you ever seen a department just go sour? I mean, there's tension between rank and file and City Hall, and what happens?
Honestly, that's often most of what we get called in for. Usually by the time they call us, things are so far gone, we're a last resort. You guys are one of the few that were proactive, and you were not in a critical state of emergency. Bad things happen. People stop wanting to come to work. They start finding new jobs. They leave. You don't have enough people to go on shift. The people that are on shift get ordered in. Now they're tired. They don't want to be there. It's a bad cycle. And we've done some of these projects and talked about you need to break the cycle in as many different ways. You guys aren't in that situation. So, congratulations for that. And now it's your job to not get into that situation by having these conversations, getting that feedback, and addressing issues before they become problems.
Well, thank you very much, and I do look forward to hearing from city administration, fire department administration, and local 1551 as we move forward through this process. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Yanis. Anyone else, council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Through the reports that you gave us, I noticed one of the things that kept coming up was staffing. Now, you know a little bit about Sterling Heights. You know that we have Lakeside, which is being redeveloped, and chances are we're going to have a few apartments there and residential dwellings, which means that our population is going to increase. Do a little thinking of the future. How are we going to handle that increased population? Can you or would you recommend a station number 6? And if so, where?
What I would suggest to you is that there's only ever two problems in the fire department. You can't get there from here. There's not a station around. There's not enough units to service the demand. When we look at your 4 and 8 minute travel times, it looks like you have sufficient coverage from stations. The other side of that, and I alluded to it a few times, and Mary Ellen touched on it, is I'm pretty sure you don't have enough units to service demand, and that's why you're seeing extended travel times. Because if we look at your predicted, you should be 4 minutes all day long or less. If you don't have enough units, so for example, we have Station 2 up here. If they're committed to a call and there's nobody left, we have somebody from 1, 5, or 3 driving 2 to 3 times as far to get to that call, and it's legging out your performance time. So what I would suggest is either, we add a unit, 24/7 asset, or an alternative, once we get this overtime situation under control, could be a peak demand unit that only responds to BLS calls and keeps our 5 other emergency stations in service, right? Because we looked and we saw that, 25% of your calls are non-emergency? If we took that call volume off of your folks with a non-emergency unit that has no time frame attached to them, that could be the answer. I want to say Mr. Vanderpool and I did the numbers. Was it 90% BLS, 85? It was somewhere in that neighborhood, wasn't it? It was a very high number of BLS calls, especially for EMS, since that's 3/4 of your calls. So as opposed to just throwing resources and money at something and hoping for the best, let's use our data to make informed decisions. And maybe we have a unit that's staffed this time. Maybe we hire additional personnel to staff that unit. There's any number of options available, and it's all subject to bargaining. But if we're doing our best to use the data to make good decisions, I think you can get there.
Well, what I was looking at is the hotspots. I don't think 5 stations are sufficient for our future. I see one more station is going to be required because the city manager is going to make sure that we are number 3 in the state of Michigan as far as population is concerned. So we need to prepare for that, to be able to take care of those people. So I'm saying that we need one more station, fully staffed, which is going to help with staffing. My question to you is, where do we put it? Your hotspot map tells you where the runs are now. Now add a whole lot of population in the northeast quadrant. Where do we put station number 6?
Well, the station location was not in the scope of work in this project. It's absolutely something we can do. And so it's a double-edged sword. We need to use some historical data to tell us where historically have we been lacking, but then we also need to do projections that we can overlay projected data to see how that would affect us. So, it's something we could absolutely do. I don't know that I can tell you with any accuracy what the answer is, because I just haven't run that analysis. But it's certainly not suggesting in any way that you wouldn't need another station. It just, we haven't evaluated that.
I did. I know where I want it to go.
Next to your house?
I just wanted to see if you were thinking the same as me. I read your book,
The PIO?
the one that you gave us, the report.
We wrote a book too, so.
This thing.
I call it
Okay.
a book.
Yeah, we wrote a book too, so.
So anyway, that's what I was wondering, if you had any advice or any suggestions or anything that you gleaned from
Yeah.
the information that you gathered.
No, what I would suggest is that we want to look at historical data because we can see where holes live. And you want to run that to go, okay, if we had to locate something based on historical data, where would it need to go? Because if we have a gap today, the gap's going to exist tomorrow. The next step would be to overlay the expected population density of whatever area we think it's going to, and then to overlay that and then run the same kind of analysis to see how does that affect things. Because when we build fire stations, they're 40 to 70-year buildings. It just kind of depends on where you're at in the country. And so we can't build stations based on what we need today. We need to build stations with the thought of where we need to be tomorrow, because adding 10 feet onto a bay under construction is relatively cheap. If you ever drive around and you see those little awnings shooting out the front of a fire station where the tower truck's parked, that's a good example of we didn't think what we needed 10 years, 20 years from now. And so I would just really encourage for good governance that we just try to project and imagine, okay, what would we potentially need? You know, things like an emergency operations center. Maybe we only have 4 folks at a station, but we have in a central station bunk rooms for maybe 10 or 15. It's not that we need it today, it's that in the future we hit a point where we have an emergency, we have the capability to do it. I mean, really, you know, to build a hallway with 10 bunks, I mean, the beds are $150 a piece. It is nothing compared to the total design of the station. But to come back in subsequent and after the fact to try to add that is pretty costly. So that would be my advice is anything that you all do, let's try to look over the horizon at what we'll need 25, 30 years from now, not what did we need yesterday.
Strategic planning in January. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Koski. Just to follow up on that point, because I mean, I think it's pretty obvious from the data we've seen that there's a high volume of runs in the northeast quadrant of the city, and that's where we anticipate more residential development will be. Just to kind of clarify your comment, I mean, when you say, I think what you're saying is you like the coverage we have from the fire departments that we have right now. And in terms of where they're positioned, in my mind, it's hard to say, where would we add another one? It would sort of throw the balance off. And am I correct in interpreting what you're saying is that we would be better served to put an additional unit at one of the fire stations that already exist than constructing a completely new fire station from scratch?
I think what I would do is put a unit in service for a 30, 60, 90-day trial period. Evaluate the data beforehand. Your fire chief is perfectly capable. And like I said, he's a data whiz, so I would not doubt anything he presents to you. But do a trial period. Just see what happens. If it works, then we have good information. If it doesn't work, then we drop back and punt. But either way you cut it, we know what the answer is. And then we don't need to necessarily commit a lot of resources to something that may or may not work, and we just don't know.
Understood. All right, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Adke.
well, thank you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
It's been very informative. I spent a good amount of time a couple months ago reading this, and then I skimmed it again this weekend just to be ready for this presentation. It's very informative. I had a list of bullet points that I made of different things I saw in there. I'd love to hear some of your opinions on these things. First, I know Henry touched upon it, but a BLS ambulance or a peak demand unit. You know, the fire service currently runs 24-hour shifts, which are unlike any other department in the city. From your own data, your presentation, I think one of the first slides you showed us, call demand peaks 8 to 8 or 6 to 6,
more or less.
more or less. And I think getting more people on staff during those times will give a little bit more room for our firefighters who do a very demanding job to have more time doing what they do best, which is serving emergencies. Because a BLS ambulance or something like that, a peak demand unit would be staffed with the 25% of calls we're identifying that are not necessary for EMS response. But we send people on those calls anyways, and that can tie up our services so that the actual life-saving work that our firefighters do is delayed. So I think that that's a very good recommendation, and I'm looking forward to learning more about that. Because if 25% of our calls are going to, I saw certain little dots on there, and I'm wondering if they overlay with senior citizen homes in the city. Or
Absolutely.
I bet they do.
Absolutely. Now, we've been to communities where they've enacted ordinances where there were, yeah, this is the one.
We did,
You know, for the fines for that sort of thing. And so, maybe another idea is to contract a third-party ambulance to handle those services. If they need something, because not for nothing, we're paramedics and we go on those scenes and they're nurses and doctors. They're a higher level of care than we are. Why are we there? And so, I mean, that would be an option, kind of speaking to your point of a peak demand unit. Again, I would use the data to try to drive that decision. And, overall, whether we add units or we don't, or whatever happens, at the end of the day, I think we need to establish a community-wide service number, so whether it's response time, travel, or what have you. And then we can watch the data move as it goes, and we can plan for that.
Wouldn't that be the purpose of the community needs assessment? We can see where we're using our resources most and
Yeah.
make sure our deployment is situated for the resources that we need.
Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty light performance assessment of the department. And so, let's say, just for example, Pinellas County, Florida, 7.5 minutes response time, dispatch to on scene. They go over that, they're filling out paperwork to describe it to make sure it's not an outlier. You set a performance standard, and, you know, if we're underneath it, then we're great. But as we start creeping up, we can see it coming. We have data now, and we can watch that number grow, and then we can start using these metrics to determine what's the best way to fix it. And so we're not just arbitrarily throwing money and resources at something. We're watching this and making informed decisions.
You know, that's a real concern of mine. I want to make sure that we're matching our response to the actual thing that we need to deal with. Looking at it, you know, we had from my budget book, and I don't have it in front of me, but something like 220 fires that we kind of counted as fires in the previous year. Now, there'll be false alarms, and there'll be other things that could be a fire or whatever. But when 75% of our demand is EMS, I think we need to better situate our department to be an EMS first department or an ALS first department. Because if they're responding to, most of their calls are emergency response, not fighting fires. That's a concern of mine. And we want to make sure that their gear and their vehicles situate that. That's why I'm very interested in the alternative response vehicle model. Because it kind of tries to marry the best of both worlds, both the alternative, the EMS response with firefighting capability.
Well, I mean, my last place, ambulances, what, $250,000, I went out and bought a $50,000 F-250, got a slide out for all their bunker gear, stuck 2 guys in there, and all they did was respond to BLS calls anywhere, because there's no time frame. And so that way I keep my $1 million engines and $1.5 million trucks in the station ready for response. And, you know, if we crash the pickup truck, so what? You know, it's $50,000. It's chump change in the grand scheme of life. And so, I mean, those are some options available. What I will say is, when we're talking about staffing, we just have to be careful because most structure fires happen in the middle of the night. And so if we're looking at a risk versus rewards, granted, all of our call volume's happening during the day, and it's mostly EMS, and that's absolutely true. Our critical calls that we're going to be on national news for are happening from about midnight to 4 a.m. So we need to have enough folks available to respond to those. So just, we have to have a little bit of temperance in our decision-making just to make sure we have everything on track.
You know, I agree with Councilwoman Koski and Councilman Yanez about that northeast quadrant. I looked at that first thing on the map, and that's where the future lakeside development's going to go. And obviously, we need to make sure that we have the proper personnel up there. And I'm not sure if that involves creating a new fire station. I don't think it does. But since we have the good coverage, but maybe setting up more squads or setting up more room in our current capacity to deal with that. But if it's already an issue now, I think it's going to grow if and when they start putting up the apartment buildings that they are planning for up there. I also really dug deep into this report. There was some interesting things about how the department functions currently. And a couple things that struck me was, one, there was a dearth of leadership at the top, essentially, that we had understaffed our leadership team compared to departments across the country. And I think there's a recommendation in there for possibly a training chief or a fire chief, another fire chief, assistant chief, to help more deal with the responsibilities across the department. Could you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than your city manager. If your city manager has 4 departments to manage, probably going to be okay. Your city manager has 12 departments to manage, he's going to be drowning. And so it's no different than any other department directors, whether it's fire, PD, and anything else. Span of control is typically, there's different recommendations out there, with 3 to 7, 4 to 7, 3 to 5, but probably, we could probably land on somewhere around 4 or 5 is probably a max. And so if your span of control is beyond that, probably we're gonna start seeing some inefficiencies. And I am in no way suggesting that we have to go out and make every department top-heavy. But what I am saying is, maybe go through and with your manager and help do an evaluation to determine, do we need some additional positions in administration? Could a office staff, administrative assistant fill the void? Every department's different, so I don't want to just throw out ideas out there, but I think there's some options, some opportunities available, and you just need to do what's best for your community and your citizens and your department.
I think it kind of makes a little bit of common sense. We've added an ALS component. We've added a lot more onto the department since then, and we've kind of kept the old leadership structure. Maybe it's time for an adjustment and,
I can tell you, I guess, last place, we went from a population of 20,000 to about 45,000 in 3 years. And it was just absolutely overwhelming. I'd get to work at 4 a.m. and go home at 10 o'clock at night. And it's just, you hit a certain point where you're at saturation, and you can only expect bad outcomes to happen periodically because there's just simply not enough hours in the day. So I think, just talking to folks and do a determination. I'm certain your manager is more than capable of helping with that assessment and making recommendations.
I also looked at, in the report you presented, that there were some technological inefficiencies in the department, including the fact that fire prevention and fire response couldn't share information. They did different databases and different spreadsheets and like 4 Excel docs, and it's not the way that I would hope that.
That's an issue. And so the issue is that they're different companies, kind of in different spheres. Now, there are ones that do both, but they're not always good. Ideally, whoever your dispatch center is, they foot the bill for the software, and everything feeds into them. So that way, if I jump in the engine and we have a structure fire, dispatch is pumping information to me. They can see the information, I can see the information. Everybody coming can see the information. And so that would probably be my suggestion is, even if we had to contribute towards the dispatch center to get a software compatible with everything, because, not for nothing, if your inspectors are in the building, they know what the problems are. We don't need to send a fire crew subsequent to go do a pre-fire plan. Your inspectors are firefighters. They can see all that same stuff. So, you just be a little more economical with their time and their resources when they're out there doing it.
That's a good point, and maybe we should talk with the dispatch center about pumping some more information. I guess my final question or comment was about, you talked about alternative training regimes and skills-based promotions in the report. So could you expand upon that? I know that one issue that you raised was that our fire prevention staff comes almost from the extinguishment division, and they go one way, and there's no really an ability in the department for them to go back if they want to, which is one whole thing. But the other thing is that they learn on the job, and whereas we could hopefully prepare them for this job a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so I was just a global statement. The fire chief that was never in fire prevention and never in training and never in EMS cares nothing about fire prevention, training, or EMS. All they know is suppression, and that's their focus, and those will become weak points in the department. We want, ideally, to have our staff, as they're progressing through a succession plan, they do some time prevention, they do some time training. It just, at least in my experience, if you got promoted to training, you were on the fast track to chief, because only the best of the best went to training. Now, in New England, it's not so much the case. Usually it's the guys who have DUIs and, other stuff. So they end up in training. That's not ideal. But if we put the best of the best in training, and then they move to EMS, and then they move to ops, and then they move to prevention, by the time they get to the point where they're the fire chief, they know how to do everything. There's nothing they haven't touched or run. And we have this succession plan that's trickling down through the whole organization. When we break that apart, if you have an EMS chief that becomes chief, the suppression's gonna lag. Prevention's gonna lag. You have a prevention guy, it's just, you know what I mean? If you never dealt with it, then you're not gonna care about it.
So you'd advocate for more movement within the department internally?
Yeah, I think you set up a plan for training and succession because, there's a lot of different facets. Fire prevention is a completely different animal than fire operations. And administration should look much more like your city manager than your best firefighter on the street. And so we want to have holistic people moving up through these ranks. And the more holistic we can make them, the National Fire Academy, again, is a really good way to push people in that direction. That's a way to make our organization better, and that's how you become the best of the best.
I think this feeds into my last point, which is a skills-based promotion system would lead to these outcomes you're talking about versus just a seniority-based promotion.
Yeah, so the problem with seniority is I've been here the longest. I may, if I was done when I was 18, I'm probably not any better when I'm 45. Skills-based promotion with the assessment centers. You go through 5, 6, 8 different competencies, and it's whoever is the best. It's not a written test like, what's it called in Massachusetts? The civil service, where you're taking a test that's just a broad test, has nothing to do with fire, and whoever scores the best gets promoted. It's, can you do operations? Can you do command? Can you do coaching, counseling? Can you deal with HR issues? Can you identify all these things that are going to cause all kinds of vicarious liability for the city? And we're promoting the best person suited, that took the test at the time. And, that's the best departments in the country. That's how they do it. They're looking for the best of the best, and they have testing through third-party groups to provide those tests. And the union's a part of it, and they have observers in every stage and every segment, make sure there's nothing, weird or funny happening. And it's as fair as it could be.
Well, I appreciate this report, and I appreciate your presentation tonight. I think it gives us a nice roadmap to things that hopefully we can change, and a way to work together to create that change. And I think we have a lot on our plates, but you guys gave us a very good, at least a very good checklist to get it done. So thank you for your presentation tonight. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I just have a few comments. First of all, thank you to Dynamix and the firefighters administration. I think everyone on council was interviewed by you folks and the community that were all involved in this. It was full of information and full of ideas. And what interests me, and I know we can't go back, but I'd love to see what this report would have said before 2017 when we started transport. I think it would have been a totally different report.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate all the hard work of our firefighters. We do have the best. I look forward to working with you hand in hand. I think it's really important that council, administration, and the firefighters come together and, as was said, be open to try new things. I think that's the only way we're going to get maybe a quick fix with some of these things to get to the longer range problems that we need to address. I appreciate that we've already hit the ground running with some things. I think dispatch is a huge factor. And I think the sooner we get that all resolved and the communication with the dispatch and Comtech, I think the better off we'll be. You've really answered everything all the questions that I've had. As far as a peak demand unit, I think we've been talking about this for a few years as a council. So it's really something that I'm curious to look at. And as far as, BLS units, I guess what's your thought about, a BLS unit can be manned by EMTs or paramedics, correct?
Yeah, there's two ways to go, I guess. So one would be we put our newest folks that are EMTs, because they're the least paid and it's least costly, on this BLS unit, travel around town and take care of these calls. Another way to look at it is we take our best medics and we have a cadre of them, because they're gonna get burned out on this unit pretty quick, so we wanna be able to cycle them through. We have our best medics taking care of the BLS calls because they can provide the best resources to try to get these folks out of emergency services and into social services, so they're not calling us anymore. At the same time, when we have that cardiac arrest, mass casualty incident, you know, whatever the case may be, they're on the way to your folks that are out there that may not have seen, you know, multiple gunshot wounds or mass casualty or any of that stuff in a while. They know the cavalry's coming. And so it's, you know, either way is correct. It's just what's correct for your community and for you all. There's a lot of different, I mean, there's 100 ways to do it right. You just have to pick the best one for you. And then kind of your point about the EMS being different, you know, we do the testing in Central Florida, the way I described, where you have all the different stations. It takes a couple of days. Usually you're separated by tenths of a point, and you're somewhere, 80 is the cutoff, usually like 80.1, 80.2, 80.3. I scored a 97. And so the district manager at Reedy Creek asked me, what gave you the motivation to study so hard, to be so far above everybody else? So I got to get off that box. We're running 15 transports a shift. I can't take it anymore.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all of your information. We have a lot of work to do. And I look forward to working together with the community and our firefighters to get this done. So, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Ms. Zarko.
I'm going to be brief. But yes, first of all, I want to thank everybody that participated. I was there when we did the strategic plan. You know, my little area was staffing, so it was interesting to talk to the firefighters that were there and what their expectations were and some of the downfalls that they found that were in the department. I think that we all recognize that we have to take a different approach to some of the issues that are causing, whether you want to call it a deficiency or overwork or too much overtime, but there's something that has to happen to resolve the issue. And I think we're all aware that we have to find, you know, we're all on the same page. But I also think that we have to be open-minded about trying some of these things and giving ourselves, first of all, follow the time limit or the time line that you've given us, but also put a time limit on how long we're going to try this. Because whether it be 3 months or 6 months, and then do an evaluation as to whether it was worth it or not. So we have to be open-minded about that across the board, whether it be council, administration, or the department themselves, is that we will never, you said, if you don't try it, you never know if it's going to work. Okay, the only other thing, and you don't have to answer that today, you can get back to us, but funding for fire departments throughout the country aren't all the same. Is that correct? Because like ours are, that's right. So, I think I'd like some more of an evaluation on some of the places that you've studied and what their form of funding was. Is it separate? Because I know in some of the places in Florida, people pay a tax, but it doesn't include fire. They actually have another fee that they pay monthly in order to have public service.
Yeah, we were actually the last place I was at. We were the second department in Florida to do a fire assessment fee. And it got taken to the Florida Supreme Court and we won. So, just being brief, general fund is the norm, comes out of the city, or the county, city or the county general fund, that's most of them. The other side is their special districts, fire districts, they're all spread all over the country. New England is got a lot, Florida has quite a few too, and they are more like, you know, all the services, say in Southwest Florida. Everything's on the beach, but there's big developments out in the middle of the state. The counties can't provide services. They form a district, and they tax those folks to provide services. And that's really the back and forth. The fire assessment fee, the reason for that is typically your people who use emergency services are the ones who pay the least for them. And by what I mean for that is if we're doing ad valorem taxes, if I'm living in a $50,000 house, I probably don't have health insurance. I'm probably not in great shape. I'm probably dependent on emergency services. But the homestead exemption has caused me to pay nothing. Oops. And so we're sending all our services to people who aren't paying. The fire assessment fee is seeking to level that playing field by saying everybody's going to pay an equal amount, and whatever that amount equals out to, and it's only for fire coverage. And it's a way to try to level the playing field a little bit, if you will. And so that's the thought behind it, but it's, it's state to state, independent. Just because it works in Florida, I don't know that it'd work here, but that's pretty much the thought behind it, is to try to get funding from the folks actually using the services as opposed to the folks who may never use the service because they have insurance and they'll, call their doctor and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's apples and oranges as far as the funding goes, so that would be, even some of your research would be different as, to the cost.
Yeah, I mean, all the state laws are different, so again, just because it works in one state doesn't mean it'll work in another, but, I mean, that's basically the idea, is everybody pays a little bit, and that's what funds the service, as opposed to strictly ad valorem, where your highest users are underneath the homestead exemption, so they don't pay anything for it.
Okay. Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Zarko. What would you say, in your experience dealing with these sort of studies across the country, that our trend of call volume increasing is typical or atypical? Is it demographic driven, just based on our demographics here? What additional information can you provide on that?
It's all relative. And so, we go to folks in one place and they say, wow, we went from 500 calls to 600 calls a year. We're super busy. Or we added 50 people to our community. We're growing. Where you look at Central Florida or Texas, and if you leave for 3 months, you come back and there's 30,000 houses where there used to be nothing. So, I mean, that's all kind of relative, but what I would say is, demographic-wise, Dearborn would be a really good example of keeping track of your demographic, because the demographic that's there has a different outlook on what emergency services are than traditional. And so if you start seeing different demographics come in, you can start predicting your call volume to go up just based upon that alone. And so Dearborn's a good example. Their population's dropping and their call volume's going up. And how is that possible? It's the demographics that are in the community that day or today that are driving that. And so, Dearborn's not that far away. So that's something I keep track of.
Okay. Yeah, and interestingly, I spoke with the mayor of Dearborn recently, and he's talking about putting an ALS or BLS unit like directly, I forget where's, at some large campus in the city, like dedicating one unit directly there where they have high call volume. I mean, I guess the issue is, like, it seems like, I took notes from when you all were talking, don't have enough units to service demand. At minimum staffing, not enough people to effectively respond to critical issues. The firefighters are too busy. There's not enough time for them to get back into the house, take a breather, get a report done, train, et cetera. They are just running from one call to the next. Our response times are right on the cusp of being unacceptable. This is the term I'm going to use. I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but we're getting to the critical point, and it's not so much that we don't have good coverage in the city, it's that we have too many calls, not enough units. Overtime isn't the answer. Firefighters are burnt out on overtime. We need more units. From what the firefighters, we've heard from both of you, that, we should listen to the firefighters. They're on the ground, they're doing the work, they know what's going on, and they're telling us we need more staffing. We need more community support. I'd like to dive into that. I'd do that myself. We're not going to do that here, but I think what I hear when I hear that, and I'll talk with these men and women, because I think the community supports them tremendously, but it's one thing to say, it's another thing to say, well, yeah, but look at me busting my butt, and, I need the support in another way, more than just a attaboy, good job, keep up the good work, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I would suggest is do the math on your overtime and determine if we hired FTEs, where are we coming up equal? You're never gonna be able to eliminate overtime, but if we, hire enough FTEs where you have extra folks on a shift, some days we'll have extra, and that's great. Some days we'll be at minimum, but we don't have to hire overtime. If the numbers work out the same, that's probably where I would start. And then from there, determine where you want to go as a community. Because at the end of the day, NFPA doesn't mean anything. Nobody meets 1710 across the board. Some get close, but really nobody meets it. At the end of the day, it's what is acceptable to you all for response time, what's acceptable for you all for manpower or personnel when they get on scene in something serious. And we have all these different metrics. And so all these, as you look through this, I guess the gleaning point is, don't look at just one and hang your hat on it. Look at everything and take a global view. And when you take that global view, I think we keep seeing the same answer over and over again. And then we can see it from the data. And then, as I said earlier, your fire chief is more than capable of providing you any information that you want. And it's accurate. Kevin's a whiz at it. So I think you have a very good resource to help you make data-driven decisions. And just really, if you adopt the standard, whatever it is, let's say it's 7-minute response time, 8-minute, whatever. Watch that data creep up. If it's creeping up, we know we need to do something. If it's staying stable, we know we're good. And now we're not doing these emotional, types of presentations. It's simply saying, hey, we've gone up, say, 10% year over year. We estimate that by year 5, we're going to be here, and we need another unit. We can start putting in our CIP. We can start budgeting money. We could put funds in reserves, whatever the case may be. So that way, we're prepared for it, and it's not catching us flat-footed.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me tonight. So I do want to just thank you, Stuart, for being here, and Mary Ellen, I appreciate you being here tonight. And the report that you provided was comprehensive. It was thorough. It is full of good information, and we appreciate it. I know a couple of my colleagues, and I had some questions too as well. We're trying to direct you towards, telling us what to do. And I think you were very diplomatic in your response that we've got very good data, and that's our job to do. And so we will commit to doing it. I think every one of us up here is committed to doing it. And I believe everyone standing behind you or sitting behind you is committed to it too. So thank you to Dynamix for everything. We really appreciate it. And I think this is going to be a big help in making sure that our department and our city continues to be able to deliver the just absolute best quality services to our residents. It's what they expect. So, Chief, thank you, and your team as well for participating and for your help in this, and to the community for participating. But most importantly, I want to thank people sitting behind the chief here, the firefighters, the men and women of the fire department of Sterling Heights. You guys and your families take the brunt of all this, and I cannot tell you, there's difficult decisions that have to be made by city council members and by administration, and it sometimes maybe we don't do a good enough job communicating how appreciative we are of the work that you guys do. We get to take a lot of credit for it, but it's because of what you're doing, and I want to appreciate you being here tonight. To me, it shows that you are committed to the city of Sterling Heights, committed to collaborating with the administration, with the fire administration, with the city administration, with the city council, and making sure that we continue to deploy the absolute best fire department in the state of Michigan. And it always amazes me. I've said it at pretty much every one of the fire swearing-in ceremonies that we've had, and we've had a number of them over the years, that there is a reputation in this department. And if I look out at the people I'm looking at now, the people up here haven't changed much. in the last 15 or 20 years. It's changed a little. But the folks out in the fire department has changed. And, you know, the leadership has changed. The firefighters have changed, but the reputation remains the same. And that is a testament to this fire department. And I think none of us should take that for granted. We have to figure out the way that we can get this department to continue that reputation. And I'll tell you, I take it very seriously what I hear, that we don't have enough units, that we're burning you out, that you don't want to take overtime because you're too stressed out. I spent an hour with Ryan in Station 1 about a week ago. All right, just an hour. And I saw it. I mean, I saw all the units that were out. I saw all the calls that were coming in. I mean, it wasn't like you guys, I was pretty much telling Ryan, this is when I want to come. So it wasn't like you guys picked a time where you knew it was going to be high call volume. How would you know anyways? So we know it. We understand it. We want to work with you, and we want to try to find a solution to this to make sure that you keep coming to work every day, proud of the city of Sterling Heights, proud of the community that you serve, proud of the department, proud of the city, proud of the leadership, and proud to be part of this organization. So I can commit to you. I know speaking with every member of this council will commit to that as well. So our most important thanks is to the firefighters here for being a part of this process, giving us your honest feedback, and letting us know what you need. So thank you. Thank you to all of you. Appreciate it.
All right. Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Vanderpool, thank you so much for your attention tonight. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one more item on my report. I promise this presentation is a little shorter. I'd like to introduce Melanie Davis, our Community Relations Director, who's going to highlight another, I should say, numerous awards that we've received once again for SHTV.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Thanks. It's great to be in front of you tonight and have this opportunity to share some good news that's coming out of community relations, most specifically our broadcast services division. Recently, Dan Rizek and Bob Surgott from SHTV submitted some of their work from last year into the Alliance for Community Media Central States Regions Philo Awards. Well, what's a Philo, you might ask? It's Philo T. Farnsworth is considered to be the father of modern television because he invented the first receiving tube for television transmissions. And now the ACM Central States Region honors his memory by recognizing the efforts of modern-day broadcast pioneers who've dedicated themselves to community media, empowering voices, and fostering connections within our local communities. So simply put, the ACM awards Philos each year as recognition of excellence in community media. I think you would all agree that SHTV has been known for creative expression and being a platform for diverse voices and a vital source of information for our residents. And today, I am proud to celebrate Dan and Bob for not only upholding those values, but also taking them to new heights. So the awards that were recently won by Dan and Bob this year were selected from over 150 submissions from Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. And they include, in the comedy humor category, SHTV was the professional winner selected for A Very Merry Sterling Heights Tale that was produced in collaboration with the Sterling Heights Police Department, with the main star being K9 Groot. And then we had in the interview talk show category, SHTV was the professional winner selected for Legally Speaking, Assault of Black Women, produced in collaboration with the Macomb County Bar Association. SHTV was a finalist for both the documentary category for Sterling Heights Fire, Ice Rescue Training, and the PSA category for Every 15 Minutes a Sterling Heights Story. But I think the most impressive is that for the first time ever, SHTV was named above all others the professional winner for overall excellence in Access TV. I'm obviously very proud of the work of my teammates in community relations, and I would love for you to join me in a round of applause for Dan Rizek and Bob Surgott from SHTV.
Who's working the cameras downstairs?
It's a wide shot. There's no captain for the ship right now.
Just left it off.
We're on the ship.
Okay, bear with me. Public speaking is not one of my skills. Mayor, City Council, City Manager Vanderpool, it's our job to tell the stories of this community and keep the residents informed about the work that's being done to serve them. However, for us, it's more than that. We care deeply about the work that we do. So it truly means a lot for us to be recognized in this way. Of course, we're only able to do this job well because of the support you all provide us, because of the incredible people and departments that serve this community who allow us to tell their stories, and most importantly, the residents themselves who shape the city into the strong community that it is. Thank you for giving us the tools that we need to not only do this job, but to do it well. And now I'm going to pass the microphone off to Bob so that I can go back and do my job behind the camera. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan.
I should just say ditto and not give him enough time to run down there, so. I just want to thank all of you for making this possible. City Manager Mark Vanderpool, City Attorney Mark Kashubsky, Mayor, City Council, our City Clerk's Office, all our departments. Because a lot of these channels that we compete with, they have more than 2 people. It's made possible because we have a great team organization. Dan got awarded for a video he did with the fire department. That's only because the fire department was so prepared when we show up. Much like the police department, I want to thank all our service organizations. Macomb County Bar Foundation has been a partner for 30 years on the show, Legally Speaking. They brought in Lakeshore Legal Aid, who really, I don't know if anyone's seen Legally Speaking in the last 2-3 years, really reinvigorated the show and made it a lot better, got us more topical topics, better guests. The story told by Rachel on that show was pretty incredible, that people have to live through that, and to have someone come and talk about what it's like to be a victim of domestic abuse. I don't know anyone else that's putting shows out like that, so thank you and thank our residents, most importantly, that continue to support us. And I think that should give Dan enough time to walk downstairs. I hope I'm right. So thank you once again, everyone. And thanks to Melanie Davis, Marissa Russo, Don Bonderick, Sue G. Lombardo, Eric Roman, and Kimmy, everyone in Community Relations, because it's a great team that we work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I just have to ask a question real quick, okay? And it's a little off topic, but Dan, if you can put that picture back up. Did you have mustard on your tie or something? Like what? Why did they do that to you? They put the logo right over your award.
I don't know.
Were you holding it upside down or something? You guys are phenomenal. I work firsthand with you. You know, I have the luxury of working with you guys for months during the State of the City preparation, and you're incredibly professional, hardworking, thoughtful, creative, and I don't know, most importantly or not, you're technically very good at the work that you do. You're highly competent and skilled. And I know I certainly appreciate it. Council, anybody else, any comments for community relations, Bob and Dan?
You do a great job. We appreciate everything that you guys do. Make us look good.
Yeah, we certainly do appreciate it. So one more round of applause if we could. All right, we'll move on. So I should have mentioned this earlier. The firefighters who are here, you're certainly, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting. If you want, you're certainly welcome to stay if you'd like to. If anybody wants to comment, if anybody has any comments for the city council, I don't know if Ryan, you're like, no, don't go up there and don't say anything. Everybody's different. Every union's a little different. But if you have comments for us, if you have questions for us, you're certainly welcome to. We got a pretty quick agenda tonight. We've got 2 items real quick, then the consent agenda. We'll be on to communications from citizens, pretty quickly, right, council? So if you do have any comments, you're certainly welcome to make them then, okay? Jake, you hear that? We're gonna move quickly, right? But before we get to that, before we get to you, Jake, I'm not too worried about yours. We've already handled, there they go.
Yeah, nobody went.
It only took one.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here tonight, and stay safe out there. God bless. Okay, before we get to Dr. Jake, we do have a public hearing, and this is to consider the application by Hunkers Incorporated for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate at 42800 Merrill Road. We have a presentation from our city assessor, Robin Palazzolo. Ms. Palazzolo.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mr. Vanderpool, Mr. Koszybski, and members of council. I'm here tonight along with Mr. George Owens. He's the Vice President of Operations for Hunkers Incorporated, so if anyone has any questions, please let us know afterwards. The real property is located within an industrial development district that was established by the City Council in April of 2022. A speculative building designation was approved by resolution of the City Council for a 16,412 square foot industrial building on July 19th of 2022. This designation allows the first tenant within 9 years to apply for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate, also known as an IFEC. In September of this year, applicant applied for an IFEC for the total real property investment of just over $2.6 million. Applicant is leasing the vacant speculative industrial building from Mancini Enterprises LLC. The lease term commenced on July 1st of 23 and shall expire June 30th of 2031. Application offers a diverse product line and is a leading supplier of automation components to automotive manufacturers such as Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, Volkswagen, and BMW. Applicant plans on creating 11 full-time jobs while also retaining 4 employees that will be permanently assigned to this location. And recommendation is being made to approve the application for an IFEC term of 8 years, which will generate an estimated increase of about $85,000 in new city tax revenue over the abatement term. So if there are any questions?
Well, we will go to the audience first. And then if the council has any questions, we will be sure to ask you.
Thank you.
Or you, okay?
Thank you.
So is there any, so wait a second, before I do that, I do have to open the public hearing. So I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? If not, I will close the public hearing, and council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Zarko.
resolve to adopt the resolution approving the application by Hunkers Incorporated for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate at 42800 Merrill Road, parcel number 5-10-10-9-100-054 for a period of 8 years in accordance with the guidelines established by the City Council, and the mayor and city clerk are hereby authorized to sign as applicable all documents required in conjunction with this approval.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Just as a matter of clarification, this is parcel 50, not 5. Is that right, Mrs. Zarko? That was what you...
It is number 50-10-10-10-09-100-054.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm not even sure what that 50 means. I bet you do know what it means. We'll leave that for another day. Okay, Mrs. Zarko.
You know what? I know why you're doing this. And certainly I'm excited because you're moving your facility to another location in Sterling Heights, so you're not moving out of the city. So, and you're creating some jobs, and in the long run, we're gonna get some more tax dollars. So I'm pretty excited. So nothing further.
Okay, council, anyone else?
Thank you for staying in Sterling Heights.
Thank you.
Council, anyone else? No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All set.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here. All right, next up tonight is ordinance adoption, and this is to consider adoption of an ordinance amending zoning ordinance number 278 to allow shipping and storage containers with special approval land use approval as an accessory use to permitted and special approval land uses in M1 light industrial district and M2 heavy industrial district zoning districts. We do have a presentation from our city planner and city development manager, Dr. Jake Parcell. Dr. Parcell.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, members of council, Mr. Vanderpool, Mr. Koszybski. I'll keep it short. I don't even have a PowerPoint tonight. So after the introduction of this ordinance last meeting, we partnered with the city attorney's office to come up with some solutions for your questions. One of which relating to signage was capping the signage not to exceed 25 square feet on any side of the container. In addition, with the concerns of what may be housed in a storage container, understanding that the property owner will be mandated to maintain a current inventory list of materials stored within the shipping container, and shall be made available upon demand and review by city officials during inspections. It should be noted that these are only for industrial districts. We see that these are used for the purpose of these businesses operating in a way that it requires some additional regulation. In our temporary use permit process through the city, we can allow these in commercial districts for the refurbishing of structures, any type of remodels, or if there's any types of flood or damage. So there's flexibility in the commercial districts with temporary use permits. Then we'll work with applicants to find permanent storage solutions along our major corridors. But ultimately, we believe that we have an ordinance presented tonight with the great assistance of our city attorney's office that helps mitigate a lot of problems we've had with regulation of these throughout our industrial districts. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Parcell. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
Resolved to adopt as amended the ordinance amending zoning ordinance number 278 to allow shipping storage containers with a special approval land use approval as accessory uses to permitted and special approval land uses in M1 light industrial district and M2 heavy industrial district zoning districts.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Nothing, Mrs. Zarko? Mr. Radke.
no problem. I just had a brief question. The first amended action, which was the, limit the signage and or logo on the container, could someone refresh my memory? What were we talking about? I don't remember even discussing it, so.
Yep. So it was a question from Councilmember Yarko. Basically, it was loose and said reasonably sized identification with no numerical modifier there. So to eliminate any discrepancy in interpretation, we put a number on it.
Okay. I have no problem with this. I think it's fine. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, council, anyone else? Look, I'm going to say, I don't love this inventory list thing. I'm not sure what the alternative solution would be that would be less restrictive. But I guess sort of like what Stuart from Dynamix said, why don't we try something, see how it works, and if it doesn't work, we can adjust it later. I think overall, it's a great thing to have. I think our industrial business owners are going to appreciate being able to use shipping containers as outdoor storage. I think that the ordinance is, 98% of what I want, and that's pretty darn good. So I appreciate the work that the planning department and legal department did on this. So I'll vote in favor of it, and without any further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Next up is the consent agenda. Anyone in the audience like to speak on the consent agenda? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That concludes that portion of our agenda. We'll move on to communications from citizens. Is there anyone who'd like to speak under communications from citizens? Anyone? Okay, we'll hold. We're all good? Okay. All right, thank you, guys. So we'll move on from that to reports from city administration. Mr. Vanderpool, anything tonight?
Nothing further, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Koszybski?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Council?
Mayor Taylor,
Oh, go ahead. You spoke first. It was a race.
No, it was
think you
a
won.
close call.
I don't care.
We'll go with Mrs. Schmidt here.
I'll be brief, Henry, so.
I don't know if we can say this in this day and age, but ladies first.
I'm not offended.
Why can't you say it? You just said it.
I just want to remind our residents that we are having a walk-in passport week at City Hall, October 23rd through the 28th. There is no appointment required. As usual, besides this week, you have to make an appointment. So the hours are Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, 10 to 1 and 2 to 5, and Wednesday and Thursday, 10 to 1, 2 to 7. and Saturday, 10 to 3. So it's at our clerk's office, and just don't forget to bring all your documents. You can go on our website to see what the required documents are. I myself went through the process. It's flawless. Very easy process and very quick. So October 23rd through the 28th, walk-in, no appointment necessary for passports. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Mr. Yanez?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. One, you know, as the Plumbrook Road is almost finished, we're going to be adding bike lanes to that roadway, almost 4 miles worth of bike lanes. And one of my big concerns, because I drive on Plumbrook literally every day, is making sure that I follow the law, and hopefully in the future bicyclists will follow the law. I asked Mr. Koszubski to review the state law. He provided me with some information, but I am very concerned that, one, drivers will be driving in the bike lanes and breaking the law. Two, they'll be driving in the bike lanes or maybe making a right turn on red, blocking a bike lane, and maybe blocking a biker, or maybe not seeing a biker and bumping into them and somebody gets hurt. I just think it'd be a really good idea if we had a program through the police department with our community relations bureau, or through the city in some way, shape, or form, to let people know that we do have bike lanes that are going to be put in. We're going to be seeing more bike lanes in the future, and we just want to keep people safe, and we certainly don't want people to get tickets, and we certainly don't want bicyclists to get hurt. So I'm not going to make a motion or anything like that. We have strategic planning coming up, but I'm just putting this on the radar as we start painting stripes on Plumbrook Road. The other thing, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to say really quick is, you know, employees come and go. We never really acknowledge their coming and going. Occasionally we do, but I just want to say goodbye to our former social worker, Amy Compton. Amy came here a couple years ago. She built a department from scratch. Absolutely no guidance whatsoever. And she did great work. She worked not just, even though she worked in the police department, she worked across the board with many city departments and made a huge difference in not only our city, but the citizens that live here in many difficult situations. And I think we were better off for that. And I certainly hope, colleagues, that in this very near future that we can make corrections to the situation that incentivized her to leave our city, so we can make sure that we recruit and retain the best employee to fill that, employees to fill that role. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Zarco?
Oh, I'm going to go back, thank you, Mayor Taylor. I'm going to go back to the bike lane on Plumbrook. Is this something that is, we're going to try this for a year or 2 years, and if it doesn't work, I mean, I'm just, you know, thinking out loud, and we'd remove the striping for the bike lane if it's not being used. My concern is the same, you know, I drive Plumbrook a lot too, and my concern is, say that I want to make a right-hand turn, and I know that there's nobody in the bike lane, but, so am I able to make the right-hand turn even though I can't cross over the lane? But then if there's a biker there that's next to me and myself, and we're both making right-hand turns, does that mean we both have to stop and can't make the right-hand turn? I mean, those are laws, I mean, it's all new. So we got to go out there and we have to educate everybody. But I want to know that if it's not going to be used, are we going to continue having bike lanes? That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Zarco.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Radke?
I didn't plan on talking about bike lanes today, but now that we are, I feel like my colleagues almost have it. To keep the bike lane safe, you should create a separation. It should be a permanent separation. A curb, posts, there are different ways to do it. Oak Park just did it on 9 Mile Road by putting in curbs. That's how you protect bikers. It was a concern of mine when this project was started, and I brought right here to the council table, that we weren't creating a separated bike lane. It wouldn't be safe enough. And that's my concern today. So I would urge my colleagues to separate the bike lane on Plumbrook That's how you'll get more users. The safer the bike lane is, the safer pedestrians feel when they are using this infrastructure, the more who will use it. The problem with a lot of bike lanes in other communities is that they're not separated, they're not protected, and therefore bikers would rather ride on the sidewalk. They'd rather ride someplace else because they are concerned about the very things that we discussed right here, right now, that they will be taken out by a driver who's not paying attention, that they'll get someone who opens their door into traffic. Any number of those things are what stops bikers from using bike lanes. So it was my understanding this project was built with bike lanes that would be permanent. I think any change to that would be, frankly, a bait and switch on the populace. But more than that, I think we need to protect the bike lane and create a fully separated bike lane like you would see in Ferndale or Royal Oak or Ann Arbor or any of the other communities that have put in miles of bike lanes that have heavy use because they are protected and bikers feel safe in their community. Building one lane in kind of all by itself doesn't create a biking network. So, you know, if we really want bike lanes to function, we have to create a network so people can go from A to B. That's all and I guess one more thing, to change the subject. We're having this meeting on a Monday because the city council, or some members of the city council, are going to MML this week, the Michigan Municipal League, to learn more about good governance. I appreciate the public support for this. You know, every time I go to MML, I feel like I come back with great ideas to make our community better. So I appreciate that. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Radke. Ms. Koski, anything tonight?
I'd just like to add, in regard to the bike lanes, we are going to be putting up signage, Mr. Vanderpool, indicating that they are there to let people know.
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman Koski. First, let me just elaborate a bit. We will have a public education campaign program to make sure motorists and pedestrians and those on bikes fully understand the rules of the road, if you will. In addition, this is a bit of a pilot program. The reason Plumbrook was selected is because the traffic volumes are such, they're lighter than other roadways, and we thought this would be an excellent road to test it out some. Now, yes, they're not intended to be temporary, but to the extent it doesn't go well, we may have to reconfigure them. We may have to come up with some separation ideas. But I will add that there are standards that MDOT puts forth based on traffic volume, the number of estimated folks using bikes and so on, to determine whether or not they should be separated. And in this case, it didn't rise to the level of separation. In highly congested areas, downtown Detroit, you'll see that separation. You also see parallel parking separating the bike lane against the curb. So it really depends on the area and the traffic counts. But we'll be taking all of that into consideration as we monitor this closely. There are some short-term things we can do if we determine that it's necessary. For example, there are bollards, reflective bollards that you could put up along the bike lanes and so on. But there's far more to come on this. So it won't be fully activated until next year in terms of full striping and painting on the bike lane and so on. So we have a little bit of time, but these are all good points that you all brought up tonight.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Koski. Mr. Radke brought up the Michigan Municipal League annual conference that's being held this week in, is it Traverse City? And our very own Councilwoman Barb Zarko will be presiding over the meeting as president. And I believe it will be her last meeting as president and her last few days as president of the organization, which she's very ably steered for the last 2 years. I think that it's been a tremendous benefit to the city of Sterling Heights. Look, I've spoken in the past about these sorts of organizations. We heard again from Stuart talking about, the national organizations for firefighters to go and learn from each other and all the valuable resources that they get. It's the same with us on city councils as mayors and city council members, going and networking with people from different communities and learning what they're doing and how we can take those thoughts and processes and improve what we're doing here in the city of Sterling Heights. And Councilwoman Zarko has had the opportunity to go across the entire state of Michigan, leading the organization for the last 2 years, seeing what's being done throughout. And it seems like every city council meeting, when we meet before, she's got ideas about what happened up in this corner of the Upper Peninsula and in this corner of the thumb and on the west side of the state. And it's been an invaluable experience, I think, for us in the city of Sterling Heights. And so I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for serving in that role and congratulate you for holding it for the past 2 years. And I think, well, we've got 3 people left in the audience and 7 council members, but I'm going to say, let's give Councilwoman Zarko a round of applause. It is very prestigious and important, and I think it was very well-deserving, and so we're happy that you were able to serve in that role, and wish you well in your retirement as president of the Michigan Municipal League. And one final piece of news, I just want to remind everybody that our city manager is a Chicago Bears fan, and I believe they're 1-5, while the Detroit Lions 5-1. So that's all I have to say. No further comment is necessary. After watching the Blackhawks beat up on us and the Cubs beat us a couple months ago, it is enjoy it. Enjoy it. Sterling Heights and Detroit, the Lions are 5-1 in first place and have the best record in the NFL. So on that note, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
Been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.